And action. Okay. See, I just did it right there. What's your name? I'm just kidding. That'll all be edited out, right?
Love it.
Okay. My guest today is Ryan Walton. Ryan, welcome to the virtual couch.
So glad to be here.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
excited. Yeah. We've been
good.
trying to put this together for a little while.
It has been. We're connected. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you okay? Let's just jump in. I want to know your origins. Actually, before that, I want to know, I mean, you are dressed very stylish.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. And I feel like, in my last episode where I had a guest in here, I was very self-conscious about that.
Don't be.
Right? Okay. But I mean,
No, you look great.
Oh, you're very kind.
Yeah.
I think at some point then I want to have, maybe we can do a podcast on, how to make a dad look good,
Sure, man. Yeah. That dad style.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
All right. So give us a little bit of your background. You are from?
So originally from the state of Texas, kind of the homeland, but spent most of my life in California, San Diego, went to college in LA, and then up to Sacramento. I've been in Sacramento since 2004, so it's become home for us. I lived in Sacramento with my wife, Samantha. We just celebrated 12 years of marriage. We have 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Nice.
So my background ranges.
Go ahead.
Ahead.
When you were just casually thrown out when I was getting to know you, when I was in a band. And I just feel like was that the rock and roll lifestyle?
No, not really. It was much more kind of the church music scene. So I picked up a guitar when I was about 15 years old at this summer camp. I was just like, I love this thing.
Yeah.
I love it. And started playing guitar in church, really got thrown out onto the stage and just kind of forced myself to learn how to play. I come from this very musical family.
Okay.
My mom, my grandparents. And so I started playing guitar and singing in church, and that led to kind of doing kind of bands within that scene.
Yeah, it's like Christian rock?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in church music. And so I ended up getting a scholarship to school, to college to do that kind of thing. And and the school just funded projects. We got to travel around the country and do, churches, camps, conferences, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I did for a long time.
Did church rock bands have roadies? I mean, do you have people following?
It's not that cool. We got to do some really cool events and meet some really great people.
Yeah.
And I built some fantastic relationships. And
what's the biggest crowd you ever played to?
Probably like 5,000 or 6,000 people.
Okay, so that's the part where I still feel like that would be an experience like none other.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, and we always had great feedback and met some great people along the way. So it was a cool experience. It's funny, I have in my house, I have my grandfather's baby grand piano. I have my guitars on the wall hung up, and I don't play nearly as much as I used to.
Okay.
But that was a big part of my life for a long time.
Okay. This is whenever I find out that, especially a teenager that I'm working with is practicing guitar, did you begin with, Smoke in the Water or Stairway to Heaven?
Neither. Okay. I had this songbook with these chord charts in the back cover, and I flipped it around. And I started teaching myself, and a lot of kind of campy church songs.
Oh, okay.
This is what I started out with, and just kind of picked up and learned from there.
Yeah.
So totally self-taught. I don't read music.
Okay.
I play by ear. I kind of fake it till you make it type of thing.
Okay.
So,
nice. So do you miss getting up on stage? Or
I do. There are times that I miss doing that. I miss, there's definitely a vibe and an energy that you get from that. And it was a big part of my life for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times I do miss that.
Okay.
I got to say, so full confession, I kind of have this secret desire to just I want to get together a band and do learn a bunch of really great 90s music and do a 90s cover band. Yeah. I just want to do one gig.
Okay.
One gig and then we're done.
Okay.
We're done after that. Just want to do one gig, some 90s rock.
What 90s songs are you thinking?
I don't know.
I'm an 80s guy. So
yeah, sure. So I think about some great 90s rock like the Gin Blossoms.
Okay.
That style music, Oasis, some of that, some of that music, some of that rock music. Just one show, and that's
can I just play the triangle or something like that?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to.
I'm in.
We'll find some songs for you.
Okay, all right, I'm in with this band idea. So the band breaks up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, band broke up, meaning we all pretty much graduated college and went our own different ways. And these guys are still, strangely enough, all the guys that I was in a band with live here in Sacramento now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. We've all kind of wound up in the same place. But graduated college. I moved up here, did the same thing up here with some different folks for a while.
And then right out of college, when you got out here, it was...
Yeah, so I moved up. I took a job as a pastor right out of college and moved up here in 2004.
Now, did you have, I mean, so you're pretty young at that time.
I was totally young, probably too young
Really? Okay.
to do something like that, in my opinion. But, you learn a lot in your 20s.
Yeah.
I was 24, came up here, I knew everything.
Okay.
And
were you a lead pastor?
I was not. So I was a co-founding pastor and kind of did a lot of the creative arts and kind of the worship music and that type of stuff. So communications, web design, creative arts. It was a community that we started was very, that was kind of the way that community expressed itself was through the arts. So it was through song and creative writing and painting and photography, all these different kind of artistic mediums. That was a big part of the culture. And so that was really my job to help facilitate those experiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then did you meet your wife here?
I did. I met her like 2 weeks after I moved up here.
Okay.
The actual other pastor that I was working with at the time, just mutual friends, we met and we dated for about a year or engaged for 6 months and got married. We were young. We got married in 2006. Okay. And so we just celebrated 12 years.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
So there's some things in your, you want to talk a little bit about the website, and then I want to go into some of the things that you covered on there.
Sure.
So how long have you had Daring to Dad?
So daringtodad.com is about a year old.
Okay.
I was blogging for a long time back, kind of in the early church days, and really kind of during a season of life where I was asking a lot of questions about faith and doing a lot of searching, and eventually kind of through some circumstances really had to kind of step away from the blog. Okay. And just stepped away from it for a while. But writing was always an outlet for me. Okay. Sharing ideas and connecting and communicating. I work in communications as my day job professionally, and I knew there was a season of life where I wanted to get back into that. And becoming a parent, being a father, there are so many experiences that we have on the daily, that are just so impactful, so intense, so crazy and messy. I knew that this may be an opportunity to come back and re-enter into the blog space. So I wanted to create an open space to talk about fatherhood. And so Daring to Dad was born out of that. First, honestly, it was just an outlet for me. Okay. I just wanted to write. I just wanted to get out there and share these ideas and let them land. And it's kind of taken shape over the past year. Okay. I have to ask, this is my first, we're going to go on a little ADD journey here. Yeah. So I had someone, we were helping out in a nursery at a place, my wife and I were, and somebody was telling me now about, I was making a joke about the little bulb that would suck the snot out. And there's something now you suck it? Yeah. Are you serious? Like, dude, have you done this? Dude, it works so good. Okay, everybody says this. Okay. I mean, to anyone else who doesn't have kids, or it sounds disgusting, but it's like I had to go look it up. It's a tube. There's like all sorts of sponges stuff. You don't actually get anything up to the mouth. The first time you suck it, though, are you thinking, what if? No. I mean, like it's funny. Those first off, so parents, any viewers, I think this is important, right? It's a tip because I've heard it's amazing. I will say this: I've tried both. So there's the little ball sucking. You squeeze it, but the actual manual is 10 times better. If you're going to do it, you got to make it happen. It's when you're a kid and they're like having a hard time breathing, because it's not like there's nothing that you would not do, in that circumstance. Right. And it's fine. It's a little gross. I'm watching that, but like everything is gross. Yeah. So it's just part of it. It's like your kid's pooping up his back. Yeah. And it's part of the package. Honestly, there are grosser things than the booger sucker thing. So I have to tell how this, now I can make this somewhat productive. Yeah. So I was making a conversation. Somebody had said that used the term common sense. Yeah. And I had a good friend of mine once say, he's like, well, common sense is a pretty ambiguous term. And the person he was saying that to was like, no, it's common sense. Common sense is common sense. And so then he said, so if you're in Africa and in a certain tribe or something that he was aware of, and the little kid sneezes and has snot all over, the mom's going to just bend down, suck it out with her mouth and spit it and move on. And you're going to think, oh my gosh, like I got to call CPS, right? If that thing's happening. But then if they saw us, then take some tissue and then just mangle the kid's face with it, that over there, they're going to say, what is he doing? Right. So I was kind of sharing this and saying, so, I mean, to us, we would never suck out of someone's nose. And then the person just confidently said, oh no, I did that this morning. Right. Yeah. And I thought, no, you don't understand.
So that was the genesis of the booger sucker, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So listeners can pause and go to Amazon and look up, I guess, this booger suction device.
Yeah.
Okay. Last thing I thought we'd be talking about.
Yeah. Who knows what you'll get with that kind of search, but you'll
true.
see. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Okay. So Daring to Dad. So it was an outlet. It was a creative outlet. And did you start getting some feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially around, certain topics. Here's, I heard once, I think this is really important, is that, when you share your story, you give someone else permission to tell theirs.
I like that. And
when you walk into a space and you're vulnerable about experiences, you give other people permission to reach out and say like, oh, how, like, hey, I've had that experience too. And I think even wider culture right now, we're seeing that with people sharing stories that are hard. I mean, the Me Too movement and all this kind of stuff is people becoming vulnerable, and there's connection that takes place. And that's like the high for me. Mm-hmm. Like that's the moment where it's like, you share the vulnerability, which I think in our culture that is kind of beaten out of us at an early age.
Sure.
And to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I don't have it figured out. I don't have it together. This is where I'm struggling. I find that's really powerful. And so that's really one of my big drives is having a vulnerable space where dads can connect and look across from someone else and like, wow, hey, me too, I've had this experience. And so that's really where it's at.
So I have to say that the whole reason I got into counseling was I felt this call to work for dads. And I've said this on my podcast before, and then dads didn't come into counseling because that's too vulnerable. Right. And so then I have found that, if you really dig into the research, I mean, you've got the, what are the models? It's John Wayne, it's the Lone Ranger, it's the strong silent type, it's rub a little dirt in it. And then there's that concept where if they get vulnerable, then their partner is going to say, that's not who I wanted, right? But then I have to tell you as a therapist, I don't think I've ever run into that situation where a wife hasn't heard the vulnerability or, a parent and then thought less of someone. It's like, thank you for finally opening up.
I think today in our culture, we need to talk, have really important conversations about masculinity.
Yes.
And we need to have conversations about what healthy masculinity looks like. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, one of the big themes of what I like to talk about, and especially raising kids, both sons and daughters, to talk about vulnerability as a strength, about kindness and compassion as strength, to embrace feeling and emotion, because I think when a lot of times that's beaten out of men, we're missing a part of ourselves. When we say that, hey, emotion is left to females and women, weak, and we even use that in our language a lot of times. So we talk about you hear things like, hey, don't be a sissy, or maybe even things a bit more vulgar. The underlying tone in that, or hey, is emotion is less and it is inferior, and maybe even extension that like women are inferior. Right. So I think that is, we need to have really open conversations about what that looks like and what healthy masculinity looks like, because I think it's very important, especially in today's climate. So
it's funny, I have found myself now trying to be aware of that, and even phrases you don't think about where I'm playing catch with somebody and somebody will say, man, I threw that one like a girl, right? Or playing golf and they leave a putt short and it's like, oh, you hit it with your purse. And I mean, now I'm very aware that those are not, those are very productive comments, right?
Yeah, not at all. And I think we need to start like calling that out and have those kind of conversations, because I think it's, if you take small things like that and escalate it to a larger social level, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of issues these days. And I think it needs to be talked about, it needs to be addressed with men to other men and called out in environments like that.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so that so I love that is, you're preaching that message of vulnerability. There are still, and I think this is one of those things to say, somebody can be vulnerable and authentic and open and show feelings, and they will still run into people that are going to tell them that's weak.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So, I mean, that's why I like when you tell your story, I love it. I haven't heard it that way. In my office, I often talking about normalizing when someone says, is it normal that, and because they feel like they're the only person that has those, feels insecure about being a dad or isn't sure what to do, or is getting really upset when a kid's crying and they're supposed to know what to do, or they don't know how to comfort their wife if she has postpartum depression, or those sort of things, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, right.
Absolutely. Because I mean, I think when it comes to vulnerability, I think people respond to it, and you never know what someone's going through.
Yeah.
And I think it's in those moments where I probably resisted vulnerability enough, but walked into it anyway, that the greatest connections were made, the greatest change was able to happen, reconciliation, forgiveness, whatever. Those are the breakthrough moments. And so I think it's an important part.
So, okay. And there were a couple of things in particular that I was really drawn to on your website, and maybe I'll go a little bit out of order of what but so, I mean, around that idea of vulnerability, you were pretty open on your website about your wife and I. You say you had 2 healthy children, but you also lost 2 in the womb, and understand the pain and heartache that accompany miscarriage. And you say something I hope to share more about. So, I mean, you kind of drive with that. I've got some thoughts there too, but I'd love to know what that was like.
Well, it's an experience that is that a lot of people have, and we know that because we shared really openly with the first time we went through this. I think it was on a Saturday. We kind of did the whole social media, like, hey, we're having a baby. And my son at the time, we made this like really cute video and went kind of public with, the pregnancy. The following Thursday was when we lost the baby. And so it was hanging out there. So we really had to go back and say, hey, this is kind of what happened, and share a little bit about that. And man, the private messages and the texts and the phone calls of people I hadn't heard from like in years, like talking, like sharing their story as well, and talking about their experience with that, and was pretty incredible. So it's an experience that so many people have, and everybody is going to kind of deal with it in ways that work for them. But we found for us that talking about it, being open about it, there was healing in the solidarity that we found with other people. Doesn't make it any easier. Right. It doesn't make it any hard. It doesn't make it, go away. And that impacts you. I mean, that leaves a mark. I mean, that creates new experiences and neural pathways, whatever else in your brain that those kinds of things happen. And so the first time we went through it was pretty late in the pregnancy. It was 15 weeks. So it was late. It was a very traumatic experience for especially for my wife, for both of us. It was emergency room and hospital, and she actually had to deliver. And that was a really, really intense night, one that we'll never forget. What do you mean?
When you were going through that, I mean, was that a time where you felt like you should know what to do? I mean, did you feel just as I don't know, as raw and emotional as I don't know, what was that like?
So definitely it's scary. And we didn't have any idea what we were doing. We were asking questions and things like that. And there's something that kind of kicks into gear sometimes in the moment for anybody who's in a situation where my focus was making sure that, I had to be my wife's advocate at the hospital and for what was going on, asking those kind of questions and making sure that she knew that we were going to be okay. I had to be, I had to show strength in that situation. I mean, she was like incredible and we both had to show strength in some different ways. We both definitely had moments of, we both broke down. I remember that first night, and I'll just share this story. We had an incredible experience. You're in the ER, and the ER is never a fun place to be, sure. Whether it's you or anyone else. And you have all these doctors and nurses going through, and people are trying to take care of you, but they also have a lot of other people as well. But we, Samantha had delivered, and we were sitting in there just kind of sitting with it in that moment. And this woman came by our room and peeked in, and you could tell she was like on her way out. She had her fleece on, she had her messenger bag, was on her way out. And she stopped in and she told us that she was one of the doctors there in the ER, and she came in. And she just had tears in her eyes. Wow. And she walked over and she put her hand on my wife's leg and was like, she told us that she had recently been through the same experience. I mean, she just sat there and she just wept with us.
Wow.
Like, it's emotional talking about it now.
Yeah.
And she shared it with us again, that she stopped, looked us in the eye, and had that moment of like powerful human connection. I will never forget that moment. I tried to find out like who, like, I think weeks later tried to find out who it was. I was gonna try to send her a note, but I was like, man, is that creepy? I don't know. They're trying to like look at, but like she, like, that was, whatever language you want to put around that, you want to call it a holy experience or something else, in that moment was incredibly powerful when she just stopped. She could have kept on going, but she didn't. And again, that's the moment of that vulnerability on her part that made that connection and was healing even in a traumatic moment.
What you can tell as you're telling it now, that was like, that was special, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to share, and I hate following a story like that because that's powerful. But I remember the first time as a therapist when I'm processing a miscarriage between a couple, and I'm pretty new at this point. And I remember the wife she was very upset, and I'm watching the husband, and I remember in my mind even I'm thinking, oh, I mean, they can always try again. I mean, I'm not about to say that out loud, but and then the husband said that, and there was this part of me that was like, oh, okay, oh, good, he's making a good point. And then I'll never forget, and I can remember even the woman that it was, where she just said, I can appreciate that, but then she shared that she said, that's easy for you because you were going to work and you were doing your thing. And she's like, I already, and they had miscarried fairly early, but she said, I already had the baby was named. I knew what clothes that she was going to wear, and I knew what school she was going to, and I couldn't wait for her wedding. And man, you just felt something in the room at that moment.
Yes.
And I feel like that was such a powerful experience. And I'm so grateful I experienced that early because, and I think I'm saying that because I think a lot of guys, when they don't know what to say and they're afraid to say, I don't know what to say, then they come out with those things like, hey, we'll try again, and we
want to fix it.
Exactly.
We want to fix it in the moment. We want to fix the moment for them. It sometimes it comes from a place of wanting to help.
Yeah.
And that was really important, I think, just to really know that understanding the experience is incredibly different. There are parts of that experience that we share together. But there are also things that we experience separate. For me, it took me a while, honestly, because, in that moment, I'm trying to be like the Rock. I'm trying to be strong. She's going through so much, and I want to allow her that space, to allow her to break down, allow her to feel some of those things. Sometimes it was hard to find where do I do that? Where's my space to be able to have a breakdown moment? Where's my space to be able to do that? And it was interesting on the way here because, you kind of tipped me off that we might be talking about this. And I wanted to talk to my wife and make sure she was okay with me sharing some of the story as well, because it's her truth and as well. And she jokingly said, I'm like, hey, I want to share about a little bit about my experience with this. And she's like, yeah, I'm really interested to hear the podcast and how you felt about it. And so jokingly, because it is, sometimes, we want to power through. And it was, I think, for me, sifting through that, knowing how different the experience was, and it didn't happen to my body. It didn't happen a lot. And there's emotional for me that I know it's not the same, and appreciating that. And not trying to get in there and fix it, but just be incredibly responsive and attentive and listening to what her needs would be and be able to respond to those. So, and again, like, this is just my experience. I'm not a therapist. my mom and brother are they're the therapists in the family. But that's kind of what we learned and what I learned.
Well, and I love that. And I gotta, if I do kind of, I hate to do as a therapist, but I do feel
you are.
It's true. But I do love and I'm a big fan of being able to give something a voice. So if someone is triggered, if they do have a memory that they don't feel like they can't share it, that they are able to kind of say, and I, being extremely vulnerable here too. We have 4 kids, and my fourth, when my wife was pregnant, then we had a moment where we thought maybe she was losing the baby. We go in and we found out, no, one is there, and there had been another. And it was like, to this day, sometimes we'll get, I don't know, every now and again I'll say, I wonder what the twin would have looked like, or where would they would be. And I'm grateful that my wife will bring that up from time to time as well. Now to turn a little humor on it too. So we were, I had a medium on my show, quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful woman, Julie Christensen. She invited me to go to us to go to a show Saturday night, and so we go there, and we're trying to sit in the back because I'm frightened of if she's going to approach me and say that she sees something or whatever.
Yeah,
well, she did, and it turns out that she was kind of been honed in on someone that was around us, not necessarily us for this. She's like, I'm seeing this person or whatever. And it was somebody blonde hair or whatever. And my wife and I we went out to dinner afterward, and we both, said, I don't know, were you kind of wondering if that was, it was a grandfather or whatever. And then we both were kind of like, I mean, was that the twin, or whatever.
Yeah,
and I just love that we could both kind of just even talk about that, Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that, I mean, your experience, it was vulnerable. You didn't have to know. You didn't have to have everything figured out. Mm-hmm. So did you end up having time for a breakdown? I mean, when you kind of talk about that?
Yeah. So I think, we definitely had I think my breakdown was initially that night. And for me, I tend to live like up here a lot. I had a lot of moments of just quietness and stillness, I think, over the course of those weeks. I think in reevaluating it, I probably wish I would have been able to spend more time processing that emotionally. I think I really focused a lot on my wife and what her needs were, and I probably used some of that to cover up some of that. I think we do that. We find whatever we can to that's something that I know I tend to do in my life is, what do I need to do to not have to kind of sit through whatever pain is going on right now. Yeah. Even if it's even if it's doing something good.
Right.
We can still use that as, this defense for that. And I think I did that a lot I used, my wife and taking care of her and moving us through and taking care of my son in order maybe to shield myself a little bit from that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think looking back, that's probably something I wish I probably would have sat in it a bit more, had more vulnerable conversations, whether with her, therapist, whatever. And so, I think in looking back, I would have liked to do that more.
Okay. So in the kind of a nice transition segue, you also talk about on your website, your experience with therapy.
Yeah.
And another thing that you say, you are an advocate. Were you always, or?
Yeah.
So you say you have family that are therapists?
Yeah, I do. So my mom and brother are both married to family therapists.
Okay.
So it's in the family. Yeah. Well, one thing I'm really clear about on the blog is I really make it hard attempts to not be prescriptive about parenting, because I have not been doing this for very long.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Really, I mean, we're just all falling forward, right, in parenting, and I'm not a therapist. But I really try to source and cite work and things that we talk about. But I am a huge fan of the process and a huge advocate for therapy. I think the fact that there are people in this world who understand how to mine the depths of emotions and what we go through in our human experience and process that is incredible. It has saved my life. It has saved my marriage. It has saved relationships and friendships. And I think everyone should do it. So major plug.
I did not pay Ryan to say that.
I mean, we all have stuff, and to sit and to walk with a therapist through is as important, I would say, as going to the gym, as eating right, taking care of our emotional selves. I cannot speak highly enough of the importance of that in my life.
No, so. I appreciate it. I have to tell really quickly. I remember when I was a shiny new therapist, and people, and now you'll hear when people hear what you do, first of all, they say, "Are you diagnosing me?" And the answer is yes, I am.
Yeah.
But then the second part of that is, they will typically say, well, I don't believe in therapy. I'll hear that from time to time. And I remember early on, I felt like I had to defend that. Oh yeah, well, research, and I've done. And then after you do it for a while, and you've just seen it change people's lives over and over again. That's one of those things where I'm sorry that you feel that, and actually then part of me thinks, okay, we should probably talk about that. Yeah. Right. What are you hiding? What are you afraid of?
Right.
But so I obviously, this is a career. I'm not, decade plus in and going, I don't know, man, I'm going to keep trying it, but I think I don't know. But so I appreciate you being, you got to knock down the stigma around mental health.
Really? Yeah. I think the stigma should be opposite. Like, if you don't go,
you're crazy. Right.
I think it's so important, find someone that works, even if you have to, maybe try out some different folks, whatever, find someone that you can connect with, find someone that.
Did you ever have an experience where you didn't necessarily feel that connection?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure. My wife, I've done therapy I have my therapist I've been working with for years now. But my wife and I have done we've worked with several people in couple situations. We've both done individual therapy, but also together. We found that both are helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's people that we haven't necessarily, connected with. And
that's
you try that.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's, sometimes when people go into therapy, then they are worried that, well, I don't want to offend the therapist. And, please, I mean, it's not offensive. It's part of the job that we do. I feel like I'm looking at the camera now. Yeah. It's okay. There's a lot of research that says it doesn't really even matter the modality of the therapist as much as there needs to be that connection. So you are in control of that. Yeah. Can I shift gears?
Of course. Yeah.
So Meniere's disease. So this is something I still am not 100% sure or clear on. But I love you have a couple of posts about that. I've had clients with that, so can you talk about that, your experience? I mean, take us on a deep dive.
Sure. Yeah. So the short of it is, in 2013.
Okay.
So shortly after my son was born, I started getting ringing in my right ear, that gradually began to just increase.
Wow.
I started losing kind of the lower register, kind of lower tones in the ear, just kind of fluctuating hearing. Eventually I started to have some episodes where I was getting really dizzy and having some vertigo.
And what was this months into this ringing of the ears?
This is a couple months into ringing. It just kind of, everything kind of built on top of each other.
Okay.
The ringing, the vertigo, and didn't know what was causing it. I had no idea. This was completely new. And started going to a doctor, and one thing led to another, talking about this thing called Meniere's disease. And I'm like, never heard of it.
Yeah.
Never. And eventually, so started seeing a doctor and head and neck surgeons, different specialists.
Wow.
And a lot of stuff was about prescription medications, things like that. But really the bottom line was like, hey, you have this thing called Meniere's disease, and that's what you're going to have.
Okay.
I was like, hang on, time out.
Yeah.
I'm like 33, 34 years old. Like no. We're not just going to just be like, well, you're just going to have to deal with these things for the rest of your life. But they kept on getting worse and worse, to the point where we had some really scary. So for people with Meniere's disease, the symptoms range from hearing loss, but the vertigo is probably the worst part. There's you can get some people describe it as a violent vertigo, like a drop to the ground
and come out of
scenario.
nowhere.
It can come out of nowhere. It can come out of nowhere. There's also like tinnitus in your ear, which kind of like just like this kind of constant drone or ringing in your ear.
Wow.
Is a big piece of Meniere's.
And was there a part of you that thought, okay, am I rocking out for so many years? Eventually,
It could be. I don't know. There's no real. The medical description is is an over amount of liquid in a certain part of your ear.
Okay.
And so the liquid causes imbalance. Some people are triggered, their symptoms visually, some audibly.
Okay.
Different, there's a lot that's unknown. There's no cure for it. There's about 600,000 people in the U.S. That are diagnosed with Meniere's disease.
Okay.
So it's not something you would probably hear about on a regular basis,
right,
unless you knew someone who had Meniere's.
Yeah.
There's a couple of celebrities or artists. One of my favorite musical artists, Ryan Adams, has Meniere's. I was at a concert recently of his, and Ryan Adams he gets triggered visually through light.
Wow.
And so if you go to Ryan Adams' show, he's lit from the back, not from the front.
Wow.
And before the show, this woman came out on stage and she's like, talked to the crowd. She's like, hey, everyone, here's the deal. Ryan Adams has something called Meniere's disease. Please don't take flash photography. It literally could end the show for him.
Wow.
And like, I was like, I cry so easy.
Okay.
I'm pretty emotional. I was like, first time I've ever heard someone from all these people talk about Meniere's disease and awareness. Right. I was just like, my brother, like Meniere's, like I'm with you, like So there's a couple celebrities and things that who have it who will talk about it, but
did anybody take flash photography though? I mean, I feel like that's still one of those things where you see someone
probably. The show was great, and he was awesome.
Yeah.
But so we had some really, really scary incidents, and I tried different prescriptions and things like that, and nothing worked. And it got to the point where my wife and I were like, we need to figure something else out. I have one of my closest and dearest friends in the world has multiple sclerosis, and she was really looked for more holistic approaches to dealing with multiple sclerosis, and talking about diet and things like that. And so we began to do some research, and I basically went to my friend. I'm like, hey, I need you to just like be my Yoda and teach me about like what your approach is and what you're doing with diet. So we completely overhauled our diet. Wow. We completely changed a lot of our lifestyle. And once we did that, I went about 1.5 years without any episodes. My hearing came back.
What was the diet? I mean, what did you do? Are you like to talk about that?
So it's it really what we learned is something called the Candida diet. Candida. So so Candida is basically a yeast overgrowth. It's really healing the gut. It's pretty intense. If you're going to go on like a really strict cleanse, I mean, you're gonna cut out sugar, gluten. You're gonna cut out dairy, soy. Like, I mean, it's pretty much like meat and veggies. Which is tough. You know, you do a clean cut of all those kinds of things, and we made major overhauls to our diet. You know, I have a low sodium diet because, you know, if you have an over amount of liquid in your ear, salt is a water retainer. You know, so you had to keep low sodium diet. But anyway, so I went 1.5 years. I slowly kind of got back into some old eating habits, and about 1.5 years in, started having some pretty big episodes again, really started impacting work. But I got back on it. And at that time as well, I was introduced to a certain type of chiropractic work, upper cervical chiropractic work, something called the Palmer method. If you're Googling out there, the Palmer method of chiropractic basically looks at C1, C2 of the spinal column, the head of the snake, and make sure, you know, those of you audibly can't see this, but I'm basically putting my fingers together. So, you know, you have C1, C2 like this. If they're off at all, they're going to squeeze your brainstem. Wow. So you need to make sure that those are lines so you're getting optimal nerve flow to everywhere in your body. So I met a woman locally here in Sacramento. Her name is Desiree Crusade. Little plug for Desiree.
There you go.
And I started working with her because she was the first medical professional we came across who was like, I can help you. I mean, I literally remember my wife and I talking to her in the car when we were first doing kind of intro interviews, and she made connections to me and my health that no one had ever made before. Wow. We were like in tears, like we were just filled with hope that she could help us out. So kind of my cocktail for health is I have a strict diet, and I see Desiree do chiropractic work. I'm 2 years without any episodes.
Wow.
I still have some hearing loss in my right ear. I don't hear very well out of my right ear, but I will take that over dealing with dizziness and vertigo because that impacts my life so much. So if you know someone with Meniere's, love them well. It's, you know, having a autoimmune disease or a chronic illness that is invisible is very hard for a lot of people because you don't see it. And so
you feel like if you talked about it, would you feel like, hey, I'm making excuses, or would you feel like nobody's going to buy this? Or
a little bit sometimes, So because, you know, I'm high functioning. There are a lot of people, you know, I'm part of a lot of online communities of people with Meniere's who struggle with employment and work and fatigue. And that's really, really hard. So shout out to people who struggle with Meniere's disease. It's not an easy road. And I've been really fortunate to have access to care and health and a support system that a lot of people don't have. And so whether it's Meniere's, whatever, I think there's a lot we can do to help people be successful in their lives.
Yeah. Do you get a lot? What do you get the most feedback for on your website? Is it something like that specific, or is it just a kind of a general, here's something that happened as a dad?
You mean like comments on like posts on certain topics? Yeah, I think whenever I talk about some of the health stuff, so Meniere's has been really good. My faith journey is unique and kind of where I've been. I know we might talk about that in a future episode. But I get a lot of response around that because of kind of where I've been and being a former pastor. That we got a lot of discussion around those kinds of things. I'm very passionate about social justice and equality in the world, and so that's a big theme on the blog and in my life.
That. I like the way you wrote this. Actually, you said a big part of my journey is deconstruction of my privilege and raising my children with self-awareness and discernment when it comes to issues of equality, equity, and our contribution to systems that impact the lives of people. How do you teach 1 and a 5-year-old? I mean, I love that concept of self-awareness, right?
Well, kind of privileges 101 is if, we have to teach our children about inequality, that's a sign of our own privilege, right? If we had to be taught equality versus experiencing ourselves, that's a number one sign of privilege. And it's really hard. I think the biggest thing that we try to focus on is listening. And the real, I feel like in my life, the real spiritual work that I do in my life is seeking out people and experiences outside of my own, maybe outside of my own tribe, outside of my own culture, and to listen and immerse myself in other stories and to expose ourselves to different people and perspectives. And so with our children, sometimes this can be challenging, is to be really intentional about putting ourselves in places to listen to other people's perspective, about hearing other stories. It's in the books we read and the shows that we watch, that they are seeing and experiencing people of different perspective and ideas, and listening to those and responding, having discussions about those. My kids are still pretty young, but I think children perceive a lot more than sometimes I think that we give them credit for even. And so we try to be very open about those kinds of things. But it's tough because it's something I'm still learning as well. And I have a lot of blind spots still to my own, the privilege that I have in life as a white, straight man in culture. And I have not always been aware of how just things that I did not earn have given me an advantage in life. I have not always been open and awake to those things. And so the kind of deconstruction of my own privilege has been something that I've been on in these past years. And it can be tricky trying to parent children along the way when you're still trying to figure it out as well. And I know mistakes are going to be made. And I think sometimes, man, that's one of the biggest challenges of parenting, is just knowing that, like, I know I'm going to mess some things up.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I know that my kids will be in therapy someday for things I did, but I actually hope they do go to therapy. Maybe that's a good sign that like I did something right. If they actually have the wherewithal to like go, see a therapist, maybe that's okay. But knowing that I'm not going to get it all right, I'm going to make mistakes, but being able to learn along the way. That's one thing I would say about my own parents. If they're listening to this, shout out to you, is that my parents are in their 60s and still learning.
Okay.
Like still growing. My mom will be like, tell me about what you're reading. She'll literally pick up the book and read it so we can have conversation about it.
Okay.
And I want to continually be that way, to be able to change and do so along with my family. So
so I like you use the word intentional. I feel like we've talked about empathy. We've talked about being vulnerable. I mean, because I feel like those are the components, right?
Yeah.
The empathy piece with the kids, and not just kind of telling them what they should do or should feel or that sort of thing, right? I had a cultural diversity class when I was getting my master's degree, and I remember, this is funny that you bring this up. So a guy that I want to get on the podcast, Dr. Kevin Christoph, African-American gentleman, amazing. I loved this guy. I really did. To this day, I will be in communication with him. And but I remember going in there and, I remember saying, no, I understand, because, I have an African-American friend, and he was the first one to say, kind of what you were saying. It's like, if you're trying to convince me that you have a friend, I don't know if you're really kind of on board with really what that experience is like. And he taught me so much in that class.
Well, it's a journey to understand how privilege and race impacts us personally, right? There's that, there's that inward revolution that needs to, I think, take place in that regard, which is hard. But there's also understanding the systemic impacts of those types of things, and how we might find ourselves complicit in systemic issues of injustice, race inequality, economic injustice, all these types of things. And so for me, it's just really about listening and showing up alongside those that are fighting for inequality. My kids and I, we were just out at a rally. We're here in Sacramento, and I took both of my kids because it's important that my kids see me showing up. That see that it's important to take action. It's not griping about it on Facebook is one thing, and there's a place for that.
Sure.
We need to be able to have those kind of digital conversations, but if it's not met with showing up whether it's at the polls or alongside others. I want my kids to see that in me. So at the end of the day, I think that's what my kids are going to take away from their experience with me, is what they saw, how they see me showing up in the world.
I love it. I have to throw one thing out there before we maybe wrap this up too. When you're talking about your kids will go to therapy, I have 4 kids, teenagers, 1 20-year-old.
Yeah.
And they know that the best way to push my button is to say, I think I'll be talking about this in therapy, Dad. Oh man, it breaks my heart, right? Yeah. Or I guess makes me proud. Which one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Ryan, I can't believe the time has gone fast.
Yeah, it's been really good.
But I'd like the idea of a part 2. I mean, I'd love to hear about, more about your kind of faith journey, about what that was like.
Sure.
And I want to, I'd love to maybe check in with you from time to time too, and just see how you intentionally show your kids what, how to, I don't know, how do you put it? You put it best, how to. I mean, I like the idea of deconstructing your privilege and then the self-awareness and discernment. I mean, so the self-awareness, but I think I like what you're saying, where it's like, if they never are taught that they are privileged, right? I mean, is that kind of the ultimate goal?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's just important to understand how there certain things about them, especially, raising, in my case, raising a white male. Right.
And that's, even as I said that, I'm like, I'm not saying that, here I'm like, don't tell them they're privileged, and it's like, I even felt like, okay, that's privilege by saying I'm assuming privilege because, right?
Yeah.
Right now. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's right. And that's hard. I mean, that he's probably not ready for some of those kind of conversations yet, but I think it's important to talk about, we can do it in small ways, talking about fairness and talking about how making sure everyone has same opportunities. We look for those micro moments to teach those kinds of things, and we do it through stories.
Okay.
So looking at, when we read at night and go to bed, we're telling stories about different types of people and how he feels about that, what his perspective is on that. And, he's going to learn and make mistakes, but, for us, it's important to, looking for schools, the academic stuff's always going to be there, but like, what is going to be his relational and social experience? What does the diversity of that space look like? And I think are just really important things for us. It was not always part of my mentality.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah.
Where can people find you?
You can find me daringtodad.com. Instagram's great. I'm on the gram all the time. You can find me there. So daringtodad.com. Looking for people to collaborate with, other people. If there's other dads out there who are writers, especially if you're listening, people, I'm looking for dads in all different forms. So single dads, same-sex partners, dads, men of color who have different experiences. Again, to share that diversity and different perspectives. I'm looking for people to write. Love it. For the blog. So if you're out there, hit me up.
All right, I can't wait to have you back on.
Tony, this has been great.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yes. Wait, now I'm going to have to edit that yes part out. Dang it.